Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, in our brand new study in Human Nature and Its Remaking by W.E. Hocking, first published in 1918. Hocking is the individual that Brightman drew from. Brightman drew from Bown and Hocking. So Hocking was representative of Harvard personalism, and Bown was the representative of Boston personalism, and those two came together, and Edgar Sheffield Brightman drew from both of them, but from Hocking he drew the notion of the importance of definition and lexical content. We're just going to take a look at an introduction right now. We're going to look at the first 40 pages of this manuscript and get a look at this personalism that evolved out of Harvard in the early 1900s. We'll begin with Block 1, defining theoretical self-consciousness. Hocking tells us that in the world we find signs of conscious activity. There's your personalism. The world is being made over into forms of the ends of life, and this is called the conscious activity of art. He calls it art. Man is involved in reshaping the forms of the outer world and the inner world of himself. And only the human being does things with conscious intention, with personality. So let's take a look at Note 2, self-consciousness as examination and revision. The self examines and revises his physical self and his mental self. Examination is performed according to a preformed idea of the self, of what ought to be, a kind of a teleology of what the self should be. And self-consciousness means to bring oneself into the sphere of art, that sphere of reshaping the forms of existence. So to be self-conscious is to put oneself on that plane of the shaping of the structure of existence. That is true self-consciousness. And in this realm, the self is judged, altered, and improved. Social action remakes the self. So the practical side for Hocking is called social action. We could call it the dialectic of social action. So Note 3, social action as remaking the self. We seek a genuine natural work of art. There is degree, there is range in self-consciousness. We act according to the social heart's desire. And here's key for Hocking. A vocabulary of lexical meanings acts as the force of remaking. So it's extremely important, not so much with the shaping of system, but forming a vocabulary of lexical meanings. That's the key force for shaping the forms of existence. Vocabulary should be coupled with coherent agency, and religion could provide that coherent agency to put all these ideals into effect. So the theoretical for Hocking has to do with definition. It has to do with precise definition, theoretical definition. Define your categories. Define your first principles. And the practical side is social action. That's going to be Block 2. Defining practical social action. So what is the task of remaking? Hocking tells us that three emerging problems come to the surface. Theory, what is human nature? Ethics, what do we make of human existence? And then eschatology, what are the possibilities for human nature? We do posit an already existing acceptance of fundamental standards. We believe those standards to be attainable, but we do begin with negation because Hocking tells us there is a side of human nature that resists this remaking, this reshaping of the forms of existence. Human material resists human art. So under Note 2, human material and human art, natural man resists the flights of spirit, says Hocking. Virtue is difficult. Rationality and freedom are difficult to maintain. Those are the fundamental categories for Hocking. We must ask, is human nature plastic and pliable, or is it fundamentally fixed? And then that moves us into the realm of the actualization of virtue. We have an immediate consciousness of freedom. We're also aware of the margins of possibility available to us. From this, we posit a testimony of consciousness. We posit what we propose to become. This leads the self to address the structure of historic being. Because historic being, for Hocking, is plastic and adaptable and can be shaped with the reconstructed forms. Historic being can be reshaped into new forms of existence. That takes us to the question of structure in Block 3 of the structure of historic being. So the subjective self-consciousness and the intention to posit social action leads to really becoming aware of this need to reshape the structure of historic being. We begin with the first principles as building forces. The self confronts nature through 4 fundamental stages. First, the passions and elements of play, and then the sensate realm of the feeling of physical ability. But then we confront various aspects of negative experience in the mental realm needing negation, and then there is the social heart's desire, which is the mental realm that we choose to affirm with regard to the purpose of the self. The self may enlist religion, which conserves values and brings all things into account. That can be an institutional avenue. Now, under transcendence, Hocking says we need to look beyond human nature for what we are to become. We need to form a theory of value. There's your personalism theory of value. But this is all coming out of Harvard instead of Boston University. And this is a spark not lighted in nature. The theory of value is not, it's something that transcends nature. We begin with defining our lexical library. There you go, that's the emphasis for Hocking. We must define our lexical library. And that means beginning with human nature itself. So we begin with note 3, the formation of meaning. And he says that we do this by framing the elements of constancy to form a definition. We look for the repetitive elements of constancy concerning a principle to form our definitions. We define facts of experience first. Very similar to Brightman here. You can see that he did influence Brightman. We form the facts of experience first before we move on to value. We begin with instinct, which is a group of reflexes that follows a specific order. Coupled with internal craving and external stimulus, instincts always reach their prescribed conclusion. So in the introduction, we learn from Professor Hocking that his personalism coming out of Harvard is one of subjective self-consciousness, objective social action, and realization within historic being. So the critical thing we learn here in this lesson, in this introduction, the first 40 pages, is that what is that influenced Edgar Sheffield Brightman? Because Hocking and Bound kind of emerged on the same scene about the same approximate time, and Brightman drew from both of them. But in this introduction, we learn that subjective self-consciousness is coupled with positive practical social action to realize changing forms of historic being. And the changes in form will bring about the realization of ideals, or the realization of values, I should say, because on the concrete side, ideals are values, as you remember. So it's an appropriate follow-up to the book we just finished by Brightman, because Brightman, in that book, mentioned that he was indebted to Professor W.E. Hocking. And we already knew that he was very influenced by Borden Parker Bown, but now we get to see this other side of the importance of definition, the importance of defining the lexical library and then coupling that with a coherent agency. Lexical content coupled with coherent agency. So that gives us really a very powerful beginning. And I think I'm going to just read through the second moment again, because that usually is your strongest moment in the introduction. Let's look at block 2, that practical side, because it gives us a task. We are to define what is human nature, and then what do we make of this human nature on the ethical side, and what are the possibilities available for us within reality to realize this ideal human nature. And there already is a beginning state of mind. There is already a beginning acceptance of fundamental standards, and we believe those to be attainable. So, yes, human material does resist human art, this remaking of the forms of existence. So we know virtue is difficult. But the key concepts, the key categories, I should say, for Hocking are rationality and freedom, right there in alignment with personalism, very similar to Bown and Brightman. So rationality and freedom are foundational categories. Remember, we just finished Brightman where he said it was logos and agape. Well, that freedom was freedom agape was agape freedom. And logos was rationality. So very much in alignment with those categories. But Hocking tells us that the forms of historical existence, the forms of a historical being, are elastic and pliable, and they can be influenced by posited definition, by posited lexical content within a newly structured form that we put together. So this gives us our introduction to human nature and its remaking. And just remember that Borden Parker Bown and W.E. Hocking are synthesized for Edgar Sheffield Brightman, and from Hocking, Brightman draws on this extreme importance of definition of categories. Precise definition of category. Definition becomes a force for changing historic being. And we're going to pick up next time on with page 41.